and broadcast on channels Comcast 8, RCN 82, Verizon 1964, and you can also watch live by going to the city's website. Also want to remind folks to silence your cell phones and other devices. We will take public testimony. If anyone wants to testify, they can sign in. If you do want to testify, please state your name and affiliation and your residence. Today's hearing is on 3 dockets, docket 0713, 0714, and 0715. These matters are sponsored by the mayor, and they were referred to the Committee on Arts, Culture, and Special Events on May 9th. I'm going to read the dockets into the record. So a message and orders authorizing the Office of Arts and Culture to accept and expend grants from the Boston Redevelopment Authority. Docket 0713, grant of $332,330. The grant will fund Boston artists in residence programming throughout the city. Docket 714 is a grant for $235,011. This grant will fund the Boston Cultural Council grants to individual artists. And then docket 0715, which is a grant of $123,011, and this will fund the Boston Artist Residence Manager as a single point of contact for creative people seeking information about issues that include permitting, licensing, and affordable housing. So just as a brief statement before we begin, and I expect that this hearing will move quickly, I just want to say thank you to you for your work, Julie. It's been a pleasure to work with you, even though it's been a short period of time. Certainly wish you well. Thank you for bringing your team here. I know that the work will continue because you've got good folks on your team. I will ask maybe a few questions, allow my counselor to ask, but before we do that, let you make a brief presentation.
Thank you so much, Counselor.
You have questions?
For the record, my name is Julie Burrows. I am the Chief of Arts and Culture for 2 more days, and I oversee the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture. Thank you so much for inviting us here today to give you a very brief overview of these grants, which are focused in 3 programs, and they're all focused in implementing the Boston Creates Cultural Plan, which I'm sure you're familiar with. I just brought a copy as a reference. And in that plan, people talked about the desire to support the work of artists, to help everyone equitably participate in arts and culture. And we also heard acutely that there was a need to help creative people better navigate City Hall and navigate approval processes. So we actually began many of these programs 2 years ago. When we issued the cultural plan, we began by supporting artists with the Opportunity Fund grant program. And this investment on the docket today represents actually an expansion of that in the second year, sort of the formalization of what had been a pilot program. And it also represents an investment in artists in a fellowship-style grant program. The investment in the Boston Air program actually represents our 3rd round and a refinement with 7 artists rooted in the implementing the resilience plan and taking the work of Boston Creates further. So they're in partnered with BCYF centers and really looking at issues of racial equity, cultural equity, and then key policy areas. All a very, very interesting approach to social justice and social practice focused on city government. And then the final investment is to continue the work of the Artist Resource Manager, who at this point has served over 1,000 artists, held workshops, really helping respond directly to the needs of artists, whatever those needs might be, whether it's information about housing or space, how to find grants, do they need an approval from the city, how can they connect with other artists, and we're very, very proud of the work that we've been able to do because of these investments. I'm very Sad to say goodbye to the city of Boston, but very proud of the team that we've built and the work we've been able to pilot and then continue on. And I know that I'm leaving the department in excellent hands with interim director Cara Elliott Ortega, the director of the Boston Art Commission and the Boston Air Program, Karen Goodfellow, and then our director of grant making and finance administration, Bridget Brown. We'd be happy to answer.
And thank you all for joining us.
Yeah, I felt it was important for you to see who is carrying this work forward after my departure. And we'd be happy to answer any detailed questions that you might have about these programs or anything that our department is doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. I just have a few questions, and before I do that, I just want to give my colleague an opportunity to either make a statement or ask any questions that he may have.
Thank you, Councilor Janey, and thank you for your leadership on this issue. And as a new councilor, I learned a lot about arts and culture from you, so I just want to say thank you to you. To Julie, thank you for your service to our city. I know people have great respect and admiration for you and the work you've done. Want to welcome the panelists that are here as well. I want to say thank you to the mayor for submitting this approval order for the city to accept these grants to fund individual artists in the Boston Arts in Residence programming. It is so essential to keep artists in the city. I am proud of the artist community, especially in my district, Fort Point, South Boston, a vibrant South End arts community as well, including Villa Victoria, strong Puerto Rican presence. I talk to Vanessa Calderon frequently about how we can improve the arts in the Villa Victoria. Power Arts Center in Chinatown is vibrant, it's doing well. But through grants like these, we were able to ensure artists stay here and continue to enrich our diverse and vibrant city. And I'm happy to support these grants. I'm excited to see what comes from these local artists, and just want to welcome everybody and just want to say thank you for your work here in the city.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn.
Thank you, Councilor Jenny.
So before I get into questions, just kind of want to echo some of that. I believe at the last time I held a hearing on this topic in terms of art, just really wanted to commend, I did then and want to do again, what has happened in this administration in terms of really moving and supporting the arts. You can see it just in this building. You can see it on the plaza. Certainly the district that I represent, you know, art plays a very important role in helping to really create this wonderful culture and this sense of community. We've got a lot of artists in District 7, and so it's exciting to hear the commitment to the arts, and I really appreciate you again, Chief, for your leadership while you were here. I wonder if we just start with docket 0715, and this is the docket that is supporting, or the grant that's supporting a position, and it's grant funded, so I'm just wondering about the long-term plans and goals for this position. And are we, is it going to be at the whim of grants, or are we trying to build that in to the budget? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, the hope would be that this position eventually does become a permanent city-funded staff position. We'd like to continue the work forward at the termination of the grant funding.
No, that's important, and so it's to help with permitting and licensing, and just as a counselor, know how challenging that can be for folks trying to navigate different processes on a number of issues here in this building, and so I think having a point person is important. Can you talk about the timeline?
Actually, I think I'm going to refer to my budget chief to see sort of when the funding might expire on this one, because we also have another grant-funded position, not from this, in our office. So I don't know if Bridget has information on when the funding might run out on this.
Funding will run out on this by the end of this.
Can I ask you just
I'm sorry.
Just so that people watching can hear?
This funding will run out by the end of fiscal year FY19, so that is another year funding this position. And we are hoping to, we're seeking grants and hoping to kind of leverage more funding that will support it in the interim between the grant funds and getting the position actually on our Fund 100.
Okay, so is the strategy to, one, continue to seek funding for the position, but also to build it into the overall city,
Yes.
the city's budget?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. That's good to know, because I think it is an important position, just trying to navigate so I'm just going to go backwards since I started with 0715. So with 0714, this is the $235,011 grant for individual artists through the Boston Cultural Council. Are you reaching out to the cultural networks that are up and running? So I know there's one in Roxbury, I think Fenway. Are you reaching out to those? Can you just talk to me about the
Yeah.
plans for getting the word out?
Yeah, we've done grant application workshops in a variety of neighborhoods with cultural partners to make sure that we're getting applications from all over the city. We have a pretty extensive email list of our own and then a separate list for artists. We're in the process, we had flyers that we made and brought them to events and have asked all of our partners to help us get the word out. The fellowship grant was translated actually into 5 different languages, and we did accept applications from people. They could upload a video of themselves speaking in their language, so that we tried to remove that barrier to access, because not everyone is good at writing grant proposals. So we thought, well, we'll just let people speak and tell us about their work. And so we were happy to get applications in other languages for the fellowship grant in particular. And then we also tightened our guidelines after the first pilot year of the Opportunity Fund to have a geographic focus in areas that were had less access to the art and were less invested in from an arts perspective, had less arts offerings.
And which areas were those?
Yeah, hopefully you're going to help me remember Mission Hill, Alston Brighton, Roxbury, Mattapan, Dorchester, and I believe East Boston. So we've,
Chinatown.
and Chinatown. So we've seen that they've historically received less of the grant dollars.
And so you targeted those communities?
Yep.
And did you get applications back from those communities?
Yeah, we just did our second round of reviews, and we did get a very good crop of applicants from those neighborhoods.
Excellent.
So while we tightened the geographic focus, we didn't prohibit applications from anywhere, but we made a higher priority in the scoring rubric for things we received from those neighborhoods. And then we also put in an income restriction for the individual artists. We said after that first pilot year, what we really want to do is help fund individual artists of limited means. And so we asked them to just certify, they don't have to file official proof, but to certify that they're under 65% of the area median income. So we really wanted to focus our efforts on artists who needed the funding the most. And at the same time that we made those guidelines more clear to have a greater impact, we also widened what we would fund sort of from an eligibility perspective: community arts experiences, artist career development, events. We matched the MCC Festival grant. Open studios are eligible, so we sort of widened what we would fund from the sort of subject matter perspective.
Mm-hmm. How many artists would be funded? Or I assume it might range, or are all of is it a set amount of dollars going to each, or could one artist get this amount and another artist could get that, depending on?
The Opportunity Fund grant is a maximum of $1,000. Most applicants do ask for the maximum, but occasionally they need less, and so they apply for less. And then we review every other month and have about $33,000, so roughly about 33 grants that we're making every couple of months.
Every couple of months?
Yeah, every other month. Yeah, every second. It's always open, and then we review every 2 months. So we just
So
did
how
a grant.
many in the funding cycle?
How many
Total,
awards?
yes.
Or, yeah, we end up making about 16 grants per month in that program.
Okay. And so that's it on that one. On the artists in residence, so that's a little different. Can you just tell me about that? How many artists in residence? How
Yeah.
long?
Actually, I'm going to invite my colleague Karen Goodfellow. She's really the lead on this and has been for the past 3 years, so I'd really like to invite her to give you some of the details.
Thank you.
Sure. So this year we have 7 artists who are working in different disciplines and working with different communities across the city.
And how does that 7 artists compare to prior years? Is it up? Is that number up, or is it about the same?
The first year we started with a cohort of 10 artists and ended up being able to fund 3. That was funded through the NEA. The second year, we expanded the program to 10 artists, and frankly, it was a little bit much to manage. And so we scaled down to 7 this year, which still gives us a really nice cohort of artists who are able to form relationships and support each other in their processes. But it's a bit more reasonable on the end of connecting and management.
And are you looking at the same type of criteria, like with this other grant, in terms of really trying to prioritize limited income or targeting certain artists from certain neighborhoods, or how is it working with this particular grant?
In this case, we're looking for sort of a diverse cohort of artists. We're not looking so much at their income. They are each being paid a stipend of $25,000 for the year, so that's a full calendar year, and they have $10,000 of materials. And we're also supporting them through some educational opportunities, sort of technical assistance, but also some training in social practice, civic practice work. They're attending meetings and conversations at the city, really trying to understand the way that the city itself functions and the ways that they can sort of form relationships and help to understand what our policies and initiatives are and how their artwork can interplay with that. And with each of them, it's really different. So it's not a very prescriptive program, since each artist would be connecting very differently.
And I think this is the last question for me. For all of these grants, what's the source? Where's the funding coming from?
So this was a grant from the Boston Redevelopment Authority, and it was, last year we got funding to start to implement the cultural plan, to pilot projects, test ideas, build them into our work. And we know that grant funding isn't necessarily sustainable, so we're trying to really show our impact by building professional evaluation into our programs and really showing what our impact is. So for example, for Boston Air, we have a scope of work for an evaluator, and we've actually applied for funding from the Bloomberg Foundation to do a 4th round of Boston Air. So we'd like to carry the work forward in a variety of ways. The Boston Cultural Council does have some funding where we would be able to kind of be careful with our resources and continue forward with some of those grants, with especially the fellowship grant, some of the matching from that the Opportunity Fund is doing.
I appreciate that. Anyone want to add? Good. Thank you again. I'm going to allow my colleague here to ask any additional questions that he may have or make a closing statement.
I just had one question. I know you're giving out, was a $25,000 stipend to artists, but will any of those artists go into communities that traditionally have really not been exposed to the arts and culture, and maybe give them an update on what they're doing, or do a little bit of training or education, try to expose them a little more to arts and culture?
Yeah, I'll just give one example. One artist that we're working with this year is Marsha Perea, who's a dancer, and she's really interested in the policy work we're doing around climate change. She's connecting to the East Boston community. She's making connections between East Boston and the vulnerable position they're in with sea level rise in particular, and also their relationship to greater city of Boston in the same way Puerto Rico, where she's from, has a relationship with the rest of the United States. And really trying to understand how communities, and especially brown and black communities, are especially vulnerable to climate change, and looking at really the way that we're asking people to engage in these conversations and sort of taking a critical view of representation during those dialogues.
Yeah, so the residencies, if I can just also add, the residencies are designed actually to be deeply engaged with community and informed by community, so that the residency is social practice where the artist's artwork is about the engagement with the community and about the investigation of a policy issue. And it's a very innovative and almost, I would argue, experimental approach to a residency. Another one of the artists is in Grove Hall working with seniors, and her focus is taiko drumming. And her whole vision is older and bolder. So she's really engaging people deeply in creative expression where they might not have had the opportunity to do this kind of work, taiko drumming, which is very powerful and loud and forceful, and it sort of combats those stereotypes of older people being invisible and quiet and sort of fading away. So it's incredibly powerful work, and we've discovered that having a whole year for them to be in residence gives them the time and the resources and the latitude to engage with community members over a long haul, not just a one and done, and it helps them build their practice, helps the city understand how are we moving forward in an innovative way in all of these various policy areas, whether it's climate change or the aging, creative aging, or perhaps how we're speaking our narratives, lifting up voices that aren't typically heard in our sort of creative landscape.
And I guess my final question is, just generally speaking, could I encourage you, if any of the artists could do a little bit more work in public housing and try to expose some of the residents to arts and culture and get them more involved and educated on what you guys are doing as well?
Thank you. That's a great suggestion. It's actually something that's in the Boston Creates Cultural Plan that we would seek out, dedicated artist units in Boston Housing Authority developments. When they add a significant number of units, that we would seek out dedicated artist units. So that's something that we would love to work with the council on moving forward into the future.
Thank you for taking my questions.
Thank you so much, Councilor Flynn. And that's it for me in terms of questions. I just want to, once again, just extend my gratitude certainly to the mayor and his administration around really prioritizing the arts overall. I see the investment, and I think it's certainly worthwhile. Certainly want to, again, say thank you to you, Chief Burrows, just for your work and your leadership while you were here with the city. Thank you for bringing your team and for the work that you continue to do each and every day. I think it's really important just to kind of highlight some of the things that you said earlier around the racial and cultural equity being an important driver in all of this work, which I concur and believe in deeply. So I really appreciate that as well. So thank you all, unless there's any parting words for us.
Yeah, thank you so much for all your support. The mayor's leadership on expanding the arts in Boston has just been really unprecedented here, and I think we're, after 3.5 years, really starting to see the fruits of our labor start to blossom in the city. And my team will look forward to your continued support and partnership and leadership, just to build on what we've put into place. So I thank you so much for all your support.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, well, with that being said, I don't think anyone wants to testify. So this hearing is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.